Ireland civil rights.
Northern Ireland civil rights movement. Yeah, so you talked about that, and it's funny. I got real NICRA vibes from the truckers' convoy. You know, I had when I was in uni at Queen's, I had Paul Bew as one of my politics lecturers, and he was there. He was telling us what it was like on the People's Democracy March in, I believe it was 1969, from Belfast to Burntullet, when they got ambushed, shall we say, outside of Derry. And yeah, so it's a funny thing, because the people who would be screaming that NICRA were right for fighting for freedom and equal rights and treatment are not the people that I see cheering the truckers, you know, and vice versa, you know?
Yeah, it's remarkable. And it's funny, this kind of came home to me when I was watching Ken Branagh's movie Belfast, which I thought was superb, by the way. It was beautifully paced and it was just right length. But essentially, you know, I think it was partly autobiographical in that Branagh lived in Bolton Street, I believe. And, you know, it just... He saw from the Protestant family perspective, you know, the effect of the pogroms of the Catholic population in those working class areas of Belfast. And that kind of was the basis for the movie, you know, that it was showing through the eyes of a child the concept of othering, where a community can be ostracized and othered on the basis of just whether they describe themselves as Catholic or Protestant. And I think that's, of course, what has been happening with the so-called pandemic. You know, that certain people have been ostracized and sidelined. One, because they believe in bodily autonomy, or two, that they've chosen and may well have even been vaccinated. You know, if you take the Together campaign that I mentioned earlier, Alan Miller is vaccinated, but he felt so strongly that there was this idea of othering and sidelining and ostracizing that he had to do something about it. And that's why, like you, I've been so surprised, because there are many people who live here who have been through that process of othering and doing down and sidelining and yet have said nothing about this. You know, the fact is, this vaccine, regardless of its efficacy, and I'm not going to make an argument one way or the other, and I noticed that Novak Djokovic hasn't been making that argument today. He simply said that I have the right as an individual to choose not to take this thing. And that is not the basis upon which governments should say that these people are to be done down, or that these people should not be able to participate in society. And that is a fundamental tenet of human rights, and it's been sorely missing here. And of course, now we see people who should have been on the right side of history and the right side of the argument now coming out and saying that it was because of the efforts of the executive that we got these restrictions lifted today. What utter hypocritical nonsense. You know, I just cannot believe this.
I was stunned, and I actually mean it, stunned. Like, every single time I feel like new lows and just like unbelievable levels of irony and gaslighting. Every time I think we've hit the peak, like something new comes out of the mouth of a politician from Northern Ireland, especially. Maybe it's just because I've been like watching so closely as to like what their policies have been, and because it's where we're from. But I've like people like Nicola Mallon, for example, who'd be preaching about masks, and then there's photographed in like, not just outside. She said there was the photograph first off where she was outside the school without the mask, and she was like, "Oh, it's all right. We were outside. The children chose to leave their masks on." And then they found a picture of her inside the freaking school, and then they're screaming about needing more restrictions, right up until the second, it seems, where they realized the wind was changing. And then all of a sudden, it's the DUP's fault that we have to, you know, they're the ones causing the restrictions to continue. And I was just like, do you have no sense of irony anymore?
Yeah, it really is quite remarkable. And of course, they all had, you know, masked photographs of themselves on their Twitter profiles. And the virtue signaling was quite simply abhorrent. And, you know, the fact that they couldn't see any virtue in saying this is wrong. Yet, regardless, it's like the point you were making earlier about the minuscule percentage of lives saved, if indeed there were any, as a result of lockdown, can easily be counterbalanced by the horrific levels of mental health issues, by the waiting list growth of cancer patients, by the fact that people weren't able to see their GPs, that the elderly were isolated and enervated, and they cannot see any virtue in standing up for those people. And for 2 years of this utter nonsense, they've been strutting around, virtue signaling, masked, and then like that, it all changes. And I have to say, the one MLA who's come out of this so well is Paul Frew, who's just been incredible, and he's essentially gone against the party line. The DUP, in many respects, were complicit as well. There was clearly a schism between the DUP's MLAs and their parliamentary party. Frankly, Jeffrey Donaldson, my own MP in Lagan Valley and now the party leader, didn't really present a strong line whatsoever. He didn't come out and say that Northern Ireland should be brought into line with England when the regulations were dispensed with back in July. We've had to put up with this for 7, 8, 9 months longer than England. And clearly all the evidence suggested that these things had to go, and yet nothing was said by the leadership of the DUP, nothing was said by the First Minister. And for all they're arguing that Northern Ireland should be in line with the rest of the United Kingdom in terms of EU exit, there were very few arguments made to that effect in terms of COVID response.
I want to get to the protocol. I really do. But first, actually, thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment for us in the comments below. Let me know what you thought and if you'd like to see more of this from the show. Thank you, and we'll see you again next time.